Hello and welcome to the Cottage Notebook podcast. I'm your host Nadia, and if you like your craft podcast with a little bit of gardening on the side, then this is the podcast for you. Coming up on today's podcast, I am joined by the wonderful Kate Bostwick of Cowtown Knits. So it's time for you to make a cuppa, grab a project that you're working on, and let's enjoy today's show. First of all, a big hello if you're a new listener. Come on in and have a look around the blog, Ravelry and social media. You can find me on all platforms as at Cottage Notebook. It's lovely to have all of you returning listeners back again, and thank you for joining in with the show. A huge thank you to everyone who joined in and shared the podcasts, and thank you for taking part in the giveaway over on Ravelry for that beautiful skein of Dame 4-ply in Townhouse yarns. A little later on, I will let you know who is the lucky winner of that yarn. I would love it if you could pop over to iTunes and leave a review if you like the podcast, so that you can help this podcast reach even more craft-loving people. If you like it or the blog, then please share the podcast or the post on whatever social media you use and let us know what you think. Secondly, this podcast is now supported by a wonderful group of Patreons, and a special shout out to JST Knitwear Designs and Popcorn and Crocodiles, and you can find links to Jen's fabulous designs and Emily's beautiful notebook in today's show notes, so please do pop over, check them out and tell them that I sent you. If you would like to support the blog and podcast, then please do pop over to patreon.com/cottage notebook, where depending on the tier that you choose, you can have access to a monthly hangout, private podcasts and a monthly garden newsletter and more. Now, joining me on today's show is Kate Bostwick, who is the very talented designer behind Cowtown Knits. Kate has just released Travel Knits for the Family Volume 1 Into the Cold, which features 7 travel-friendly projects to keep you and your family cozy. Kate is a globe-trotting knitwear designer, and she is currently living in Calgary in Canada. She chats about her book, her designer, life in the UK, how she chose her yarns for the book, and the knitting community in both the UK and in Canada. So without further ado, I will hand you on over to the wonderful Kate. Hello Kate, and welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a knitwear designer?
Hi, thanks for having me on the show. I am a knitwear designer in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. And I kind of came about doing that in a roundabout way. I had a few other careers, but none of them stuck. So I have a background. I was a geologist for a while, straight out of university, and I got into geology because I wanted to be outside and doing things, but I ended up in an office staring at a computer, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. And then I went to school to become a winemaker, and I really enjoyed that. But then family happened, and I never kind of got kickstarted into the wine industry before I had kids. So there wasn't really, once I was ready to go back to work, there wasn't work to go back to. So I was knitting a lot as a stay-at-home mom, and I think my story is similar to a lot of other designers, that I was looking for a pattern that I couldn't find because it didn't exist. And so I thought, well, I've got, a pretty heavy math background, and I could probably figure this out on my own. And I did, and I liked it, and I just kind of kept going with it, and the next pattern followed, and the pattern after that. So it's kind of how I ended up there.
Could you give us a brief introduction to Travel Knits, please?
So Travel Knits for the Family, Volume 1, Into the Cold, is a book of patterns for the whole family, no matter what your family is, actually. There's men's patterns, there's women's patterns, there's unisex children's patterns, hats and mittens and slippers and a blanket. And the idea is that they're all things that you take with you when you travel. Because I've traveled a lot, and I wanted to share what I think is really important to take with you when you go. And wouldn't it be nice if it was all hand knit?
What I love about the patterns is that you can literally knit them as you're traveling. They don't need to be patterns that you knit before you go on holidays either.
Yeah, so what's interesting actually is that I did a lot of the knitting for the book while I was traveling, and so I can say that yes, you can. The slippers are knit two 50-gram skeins of yarn, and they're pretty easy to tuck into your bag, and it's mostly garter stitch with some short rows and stuff. So it's pretty easy to knit while you're traveling. Hat, I knit the Dublin Sweater on a Eurostar train with my parents. The journey blanket has been knit all over the world, actually, on 3 different continents, I think, because it's knit in squares, and you just take 2 skeins of yarn, and you're good to go for a while, and you don't have something heavy weighing down your on your lap. You can just tuck it in with you wherever you go. And yeah, I do most of my knitting on the go. So I think my patterns probably end up reflecting that.
The Family Knits is your third book because you have 2 previous ones on Ravelry.
Yes, they were collections, ebooks that I had originally published, and not with the thought of it being a book. But then afterwards, I published them in hard copy.
And then Travel Knits is your first hard copy
The first,
from the beginning.
Yes, from the beginning, and it adds. There's more to it than the other books are kind of a collection of patterns and a brief introduction, and that's that.
Do you want to talk about the evolution from them to this book then?
Sure. So the ideas, I think once I started Fundy Tides and Powder Day, I had started to think about things in terms of collections. I would have an idea for a pattern, and then I would kind of have an idea, well, this actually would look nice in a few different ways. And instead of committing myself to the one pattern with that idea, I expanded and did 4 patterns from that idea. And then I had done a few single patterns in between. But then when it came to the travel knits, I guess I had, again, this idea. The travel knits came as a concept before any of the patterns individually did. I was planning on taking a break from knitting, actually, and from designing. And this idea came into my head, and I couldn't ignore it. So it was the idea of having a whole set of staples of things that you needed to pack when you go traveling. And so it wouldn't leave me alone.
So the book kind of evolved organically from the ideas from the individual patterns then into a whole series?
With travel knits? No, actually, it came as a concept because we were traveling a lot and we were packing a lot. And I had gotten really good at packing. We were packing the day before and nailing it. So I thought, this is a bit of expertise that we have here. And I thought about the fact that we also try to pack fairly light because we didn't have a car in London and we were getting to and from the airport by train and bus and everything. So we always packed fairly light. And but I always had the staples with me. Even if it was in the summertime, I always packed a small cardigan for everybody just in case the nights were cool. And heading into cooler weather, I would always bring a hat. I would always bring mittens and slippers. And I just kind of thought about that one day, that this is a collection of patterns, the idea that these are the things that you always have to bring and we always pack when we go somewhere. And so I kind of had that idea, and then I broke down the concept into individual patterns and thought about what I would want those patterns to be if they were staples. And so it kind of came as a concept, and the patterns followed rather than the other way around.
And which is your favorite pattern from the book?
I have to say it's the journey blanket. I know
As well.
I get that a lot. Like, it's obviously been the pattern that really grabbed people more than anything else. But yeah, I'm really proud of how that turned out. It came together as I hoped it would, and it's really pretty. And it includes my favorite techniques too. I love slip stitch cable motifs. I think it's a effective way of making something look really interesting without needing to really know any very advanced techniques.
Can I ask how you chose your yarns for the book?
So the yarns came as I wanted to be able to have the pattern be knit by people anywhere in the world, hopefully. And I know people like to be able to knit from the yarn in the pattern. So I tried to pick ones that were available to people. So the journey blanket, actually, when I was looking for yarn for that, I actually put a call out on Instagram and said, hit me with your ideas of yarns that can be accessed wherever. And actually, Estelle from Midwinter Yarns said, I ship. and I had a look at the Perkalenka, and it was beautiful, and it fit perfectly. And knowing that was available to lots of people because I lived in the UK for a while, and because I'm now back in Canada, I have customer bases in different places, and I wanted it to be available. But otherwise, I picked things that I really liked. The Dublin Sweater with the travel knitter yarn, it's just beautiful yarn. I see travel knitters yarns when I go to shows, and they just pop out at you because they're so bold and saturated and gorgeous.
It really, the green for the Dublin Sweater is beautiful.
It worked out really, really well. It's what you think of when you think of Ireland, right? That green is it's right. True. Yeah.
Not right now because everything's burnt, but
yes.
Normally you think of green.
I know we were in the UK recently, and we're shocked at how yellow everything was instead of the usual green. We were quite surprised. We've never seen it that way before. So,
can you tell us how you learned how to knit?
Oh, that's a good one. I learned a few times when I was growing up, but it never stuck. And then in university, my friend and my roommate and I were both broke. We had no money left come Christmas time. We decided we were going to make presents for our families. And she knew how to knit. And she was working on a cross stitch, actually. And I was working on a scarf for my mom. And when I think it was just a fairly basic garter stitch scarf. But when I ran into a problem, she was there. And she could help me fix my mistakes. And I guess I got to a point with having somebody right there, my roommate right there, as I was knitting, helping me along the way. I was able to finally master knitting and purling to a point where I could really go with it. So I really think that when people learn how to knit, it's helpful to have somebody there to show you how to fix your mistakes, because I know that that's what finally made it stick for me. So I didn't knit a whole lot during, university and then off into, being a career woman. But once I got pregnant, I decided that I needed to knit everything for the baby. So that's when it really came on, and that's when I started knitting quite a lot.
So then how did you meet Alison and everyone in the UK?
Actually, Alison is just super, super friendly. So before I was moving, I thought I'm not super good at meeting people and connecting with people, but I knew there was a good knitting community in London. So I think it was on Twitter. I just said, Twitter people, do you know anybody in London who does a knit night, or, who I should get in touch with when I get there, just so I could start getting to know people. And somebody mentioned Alison, and Alison's like, oh, hey, we have a knit night. And actually the their Great London Yarn Crawl was going on just a couple weeks after I arrived. So that was a good chance. I went on, well, I didn't get a ticket. They were already well sold out by then, but I went to their, they had a pop-up market afterwards. And so I went and I think I met them at that time, and they had a knit night that was really close to where I lived. So I got to know them through knit night, and yeah.
Knit nights are amazing.
Oh, it was so good because, yeah, I went to a city where I didn't know anybody, and I was able to meet these people who at least had one thing in common, that, we all sat and knit, and it was at a pub. So it was easy to feel comfortable and get to know some people.
So I guess my next question is, it's a really hard one for all knitters, but what is your favorite thing to knit? Are you a sock knitter, accessory knitter, you personally?
I am not a sock knitter. Don't know if I can say. I'm a sweater person, that's a big commitment every single time you sit down and knit a sweater. But I think that's my heart is in sweater knitting. I do like instant gratification stuff. I love to knit a hat and mittens and things. But if I really want to dig into something, I like to knit a sweater.
So for designing for you,
yes.
Do you initially go to sweater patterns first?
Yeah, that's always what's in my head, and that's where my favorite ideas come from. I often will see something in a store, or like a shape, or something interesting, and my head starts to go like, how can I create that? Often it's not they're not knit sweaters, but I'll see a shape on something that was sewn, or something that I've kind of got. I guess I have a bit of an engineering mind. I like to think about the construction and how I could do something a little bit differently to make it interesting and new. And it's always sweaters that do that for me. And accessories come along in between, but my heart's with the sweaters.
You have a beautiful Heavenly pullover from Powder Day, which is actually one of my personal favorites.
Thank you.
Particularly because of the kind of zigzag line going down the side.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, pop on over to Ravelry, look up Heavenly pullover and have a look, because it's beautiful. So how do you feel like you have evolved as a designer over the years? Because you have some very beautiful patterns there, 2014 and it's now 2018, so that's 4 years.
It's been a bit of a journey. I think that I like adding in new techniques. If I pick up something new every once in a while, I don't get a chance to very often, but I'll knit somebody else's pattern, or take a class or something, and I pick up a new technique that I haven't used before, and then it sticks in my head and I want to use it. And so I'd say my patterns and my designing has evolved as I've learned new things and picked up new techniques. And I guess I kind of want to share them, and I want to see how I can use them. And I honestly believe that anybody can do anything in knitting. Some limitations, I guess, but if you can knit and purl and follow directions, then I don't think anybody should be afraid of any new techniques.
That's true. And you do offer tutorials on your blog as well.
I honestly feel that people can do things, and I feel like people are often intimidated. They'll look at a pattern and say, well, that looks hard. I don't think I can do that. And I don't think that should ever be a limitation to anybody. I think that if I give you a pattern and you know the basics, and all I need to do is give you a few extra tips on how to do a certain technique, and then you can do it. And that's why I started providing the tutorials, because I really think that everybody should be able to see a pattern that they like and say, okay, I can do this. And all they might need is a few extra tools. And so I try to be really clear with my tutorials. I try to be really clear with my patterns, so that they're not making assumptions that people already know how to do everything. So I want people to get there. I want to help people get there.
I'm going to ask you now about the photography for the book because it is something that I absolutely love. It sets the tone for the entire collection, and it sets off your yarn choices and your colours beautifully. So can you tell us how you did the photo shoots and how they came about?
Yeah, so they came about. It's actually a bit of a funny story. I met Tammy Henratty is the photographer. Her son went to play school with my daughter. So we actually, she's another mom, a local mom that I knew, and she had done some family photos for us previously, but she's a professional photographer, and I'd always wanted to get her to do some pattern photography for me. And it hasn't always been in the budget, and I usually end up doing the photography myself. But there's always an aspect of the photos aren't. I don't have the ability to get my vision into my photography yet. It's just not there. So when it came time to do the book, and when we found out we were moving back to Calgary, I thought, oh, well, I'll get in touch with Tammy, and hopefully we can make that work. And it did. I got in touch with her, and we, planned back and forth. And she asked me for some examples of photography that I liked and kind of what I wanted. And so I went on Ravelry, and I was looking at other designers' photos and knitting photos that I liked. And Kate Davies' photography that she has, they all stood out to me. And everything that I sent Tammy as an example of what I liked, they were all hers. So I think Tammy kind of captured what I was going for there and what I liked out of that whole style and aesthetic. And I think she had probably grasped that I like color, and so the colors that I used were vibrant, and she made them pop in the photos. And I really can't say enough to how well she works with kids too, because it was really, really cold that day. Exceptionally cold, and the kids were a bit miserable. We were layering all the knitwear on top of them in between shots, and putting them back in the car with the motor running to try to keep them warm. And it was not the easiest day, but she was so great with keeping everybody in a good mood. And you wouldn't know it from the photos. You wouldn't know that everybody was. Yeah, they're gorgeous. Yeah.
And are they shot in a park or?
Yeah, they're actually shot it's a provincial park that happens to be in the city of Calgary. Quite interestingly, so you don't necessarily see a lot of the details of the background, but it was actually at an old ranch that one of the first people to set up and settle in Calgary, actually, in this big old ranch house, and they've preserved that. Now it's actually a restaurant, but it's been preserved in the provincial park, and around it is beautiful, forests and grasslands, and it's actually just a beautiful part of the city.
Can I ask you, how long was your process from the conception to the publication of the book?
Longer than anticipated. So I think the idea came around Christmas time of 2016. We were on a trip to Central Europe. We went to Austria and Czech Republic and Hungary. And it was kind of on that trip where I thought, I was looking at what we had packed and that it was these staples. And that's where the idea came. And I had hoped to get it out for the winter of 2017. But then we moved across an ocean in between. And it kind of threw a wrench in the works because there's a lot to do with moving overseas. And so it took a bit longer, and then finally came out in May. So I'm not sure on the exact timing of that, but that's almost a year and a half, I guess. And I'd hope to keep it under a year. But
everyone who's ever moved will understand.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I have to ask, because we were talking about it earlier, how does your knitting community in Calgary in Canada compare to the one in the UK?
It's very interesting. In the UK, I mean, living in London, you're one of a lot of people. And there was a lot of support and a lot of activity going on there. And I was able to meet people in the industry who I really admired and who helped my career along. And that's been invaluable, the connections that I've made while I was there. And now being back in Calgary is a different story. There's not as much activity going on here, but it's a closer activity. I have closer connections maybe with some of the people here, and the support that I've gotten here has been incredible. The Loop here in Kensington, which just happens to be very close to my house, which is very convenient, they've been so supportive of my book. They hosted a launch party, and they keep selling out of books. The community has been fabulous here. Like I bring books to the store and they sell out, and I bring more and they sell out, and it's been wonderful to be maybe in a smaller community where I just get more personal support, which has been great as well, just in a very different way.
Are you part of online groups as well? Because I find people with the smaller, they tend to log into online knitter groups or forums.
Yeah, I was a heavy Ravelry user back in the day. My Ravelry use has fallen off a little bit recently just because of being busy, and I'm on Instagram. I'd say Instagram is my favorite social media platform because I'm a visual person, and I love how I can tell a story with pictures and see other people's stories with pictures. Facebook, I think, is also I don't get on there as much as I'd like to, but it's been really great way to meet a different set of people as well. Yeah.
Is your book doing any blog tours?
Not a ton. I think that there will be a few more people doing little features. Renee Callahan of East London Knit did a review of my book on her podcast, but I don't have a lot of firm things planned.
So now that the volume 1 is out there, what is in the future for you?
Volume 2. I really committed myself by calling the book Volume 1. And originally the book was supposed to be not Volume 1 and Volume 2, but it was too many patterns to fit into one book. So I decided to split it into cold weather patterns, and then Volume 2 would be for warmer weather. After all the hubbub of trying to publish the book and get it out there, I've had some downtime, but I'm finding it a little bit. I wanted to take a break, but I'm getting a little stir crazy. So I've already started working on Volume 2. And so those will all be things to pack if you're going somewhere sunny and warm. So.
And are you going to try for a year release date, or?
I would love to release it the same time next year, so end of May of 2019, which means I need to get going on it. But I have.
And no moving.
Yes, no moving in between this time. That would be ideal. And, having done it once and also having set the style and the photography, and there's a lot of things that won't change from the first book to the second. So a lot of the work has been done already. So I'm hoping that the second volume is just going to fly out. It'll just go. Yeah.
We can chat in a year.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully a year.
And people can, of course, find you online. You're on Instagram. You're also contactable through your website.
Yes. Yeah. I'm pretty much Cowtown Knits everywhere. The website is cowtownknits.com. I'm Cowtown Knits on Ravelry, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So you can always find me there.
So within the book, you have your little travel journal, which kind of discusses a little bit about where you visited for each pattern, which is a really, really beautiful way of remembering your journeys as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the travel journal?
Yeah, so those, as I was putting the book together, I was kind of writing those along the way and smiling. And actually, it was really wonderful to go back as I was writing those, and actually about doing the blog posts afterwards and adding pictures and reading a little bit more about each place that we went. It was wonderful to go back and look through all the pictures, because I'm not always great at documenting what we've done and where we've been, but it was really wonderful to get a chance to go back and look through all of those trips and the things that we did, and they made me smile. And actually, as we were putting the book together, I had a moment of being very self-conscious about it and cut it all out and sent it off to the editor. And I thought, oh, I just want to stay concise. People don't want to hear these things. And we don't need to take up the extra space in the book with my rambling about places that we've been. And my editor, Amelia Hodgson, actually wrote, and she said, I feel like it's missing something. Can you maybe talk about some of the places you've been? I said, I've actually written it all already, and I took it out. So she said, no, put it in. And so I did. And she wrote back, oh, these are great. So it was good that she helped me get over being self-conscious about them. And I do think that it does add a little personality to it, to the book. And I'm glad that they're there. One thing that kind of has been pointed out to me afterwards, and, when you're working on the book, you're busy and you kind of get a single track mind on whatever task you're working on. But I've had people say, this is a wonderful thing for you to have. Here's a moment in our time as a family, these couple years, and it's documented here, and there's the beautiful photographs of all of us together. And it's something that we'll always have. And I'm really glad that it's come together the way it has.
I really think it's beautiful. I was wondering if they were written retrospectively or if they're kind of little notes kind of while you were traveling and then
totally retrospectively. I am not that organized. No, actually, it was a lot of reminiscing while writing those, and jogging my memory, looking back at the trips as I wrote them. So.
And if people do want to read more, they can pop over to your blog as well, which is cowtownknits.com.
Yes, yeah. For every pattern that I introduced in the lead up to the book, I wrote a little bit of extra and added some photos and, a little background.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Kate.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have
Thank you for having me.
And please do remember, all of the links will be in today's show notes as well. And do pop over and say hi to Kate. In fact, do it now. Pop on over to Instagram.com, and she is Cowtown Knits. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back. I really hope that you enjoyed today's show, and it would be wonderful if you could pop over to iTunes and leave a review of today's episode. And if you don't listen via iTunes, then please do share the episode on social media, email, or Ravelry so that others can find it too. Don't forget that you can add your own questions to the interview by becoming a patron over on patreon.com/Cottage Notebook. I will be back with another audio podcast in September. But if you want to hear more from me, until then, you can pop on over to Instagram, where you can find me as Cottage Notebook. I'm on Ravelry in the group as Bunny T. And of course, you can catch up with all the vlogs and stuff over on YouTube. I will be taking a little break over the month of August, but of course, the podcast will still go live up on Patreon. I guess that's all that's left to say. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your summer. You can keep up to date with everything that I'm doing on Instagram. Like I said, I will be off to Yarn Folk to take part in both the festival and to help out the wonderful Yvonne from Dublin Dye Company, whom I just adore. And you will be hearing a little bit from her as well, and a little bit from our trip. I'm going to keep you guessing. So for now, I'm going to say I'm your host, Nadia, and from the Cottage Notebook, grow, craft, love. Bye-bye.